5 years of loyalty meant nothing the moment the divorce papers hit the mahogany desk. Preston didn't just want to leave his wife, he wanted to erase her. He called her planes. He called her a financial burden. He called her an anchor, dragging down his rise to the billionaires' club. He thought he was trading a jagged rock for a polished diamond when he brought his mistress into their home that very night. But Preston made a fatal calculation. He assumed his wife's silence was weakness. He assumed her thrift store clothes meant poverty. He didn't know that the woman he was throwing out wasn't just Sarah from Ohio. She was Her Royal Highness, and she was done playing peasant. The invitation on the table was embossed in gold leaf, heavy enough to crack a coaster. The Met Gala. The event of the season. Preston Calloway stared at it, running a manicured thumb over his own name. It sat there like a promise. At 34, Preston was the youngest hedge fund manager in Manhattan to crack the Forbes 30 under 30 list twice, but he was hungry for something money couldn't buy: prestige. Old money prestige. The kind that didn't look at his new money suits and sniff in derision. He looked up at his wife, Sarah. She was sitting across from him at their expansive breakfast bar, buttering a piece of burnt toast. She wore that same grey cardigan she'd had since they met in college. Her hair was pulled back in a messy utilitarian bun held together by a plastic clip. No makeup. No jewelry, aside from the modest gold band he'd bought her 5 years ago when he was still a junior analyst. She looked dusty. Like a piece of furniture you forgot to cover during a renovation. "Happy anniversary, Preston," she said softly, sliding a small wrapped box toward him. It was wrapped in newspaper. She was always doing that, recycling. "I made you something." Preston didn't reach for it. He took a sip of his black coffee, the bitterness matching the taste in his mouth. "We need to talk, Sarah." Sarah paused, the butter knife hovering. "Okay. Do you want to open your gift first?" I'm filing for divorce." The silence that followed was absolute. The hum of the Sub-Zero refrigerator seemed to roar. Sarah slowly set the knife down. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just blinked, her hazel eyes scanning his face with a terrifying calmness. "Divorce," she repeated, tasting the word. "It's not working, Sarah." "It hasn't worked for a long time." Preston stood up, adjusting his silk tie. He needed to dominate this interaction. He had rehearsed this with his lawyer, Benedict Sterling, a shark who cost $1,500 an hour. "Keep it clinical. Keep it quick." "Is there someone else?" Sarah asked. Her voice didn't shake. Preston scoffed, walking to the window that overlooked Central Park. "That's not the point. The point is, look at you, Sarah. And look at where I'm going." He gestured vaguely at the skyline. "I need a partner who fits the life I'm building. I need someone who can host a gala, not someone who hunts for coupons. You're simple. And I can't afford simple anymore." "Simple," she echoed. "You have no ambition. You're content volunteering at that animal shelter and reading books. I'm trying to build an empire, Sarah. You're an anchor. He turned back to her, expecting tears. Expecting begging. Instead, Sarah took a bite of her burnt toast. So you're trading me in. Does this upgrade have a name? Preston's jaw tightened. Jessica. Jessica Vane, Sarah nodded slowly. She knew the name. Jessica Vane was an influencer, a woman who was famous for being famous. She was the daughter of a minor oil tycoon, loud, flashy, and draped in logos. She was everything Preston thought he wanted. She understands the world I live in, Preston said defensively. She has connections. She has style. She has a cocaine habit and a history of suing her assistants, Sarah noted dryly. She has class. Preston slammed his hand on the counter. And she's moving in. Tonight, Sarah looked at the newspaper-wrapped gift on the table. Tonight, on our anniversary, my lawyer has drawn up the papers. Since we signed a prenup, Preston smirked, you get the lump sum we agreed upon. $50,000. It's more than you've ever contributed to this marriage. Pack your things. I want you out by 6:00 p.m. He checked his Rolex. I have a board meeting. Don't make a scene when Jessica arrives. Preston grabbed his briefcase and stormed out, leaving his wife of 5 years sitting alone in the cold, marble kitchen. He didn't look back. If he had, he might have noticed that Sarah wasn't crying. She was reaching for her phone, a burner phone she kept hidden in the pocket of her grey cardigan. She dialed a number that started with a country code rarely seen in New York. It's done, she said into the receiver, her voice shifting from American English to a crisp, aristocratic French. He initiated it. Protocol is satisfied. Come get me. By 5:00 p.m., the penthouse looked different. Not because Sarah had trashed it, she wasn't that kind of person, but because her absence made the space feel sterile. She had packed her life into 2 battered suitcases. She stood by the door, the check for $50,000 in her hand. Preston had left it on the counter like a tip for a waitress. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open, and Jessica Vane made her entrance. She was a vision of manufactured perfection. Platinum blonde extensions, 6-inch Louboutins, and a white fur coat that probably cost more than Sarah's settlement. Preston trailed behind her, carrying 3 of her Louis Vuitton trunks. He looked like a bellhop, but he wore a grin of triumphant ownership. Oh wow, Jessica drawled, stepping into the foyer and looking Sarah up and down. She wrinkled her nose. You're still here. Preston, darling, you said the help would be gone. She's just leaving, Preston said, dropping the bags. He wouldn't meet Sarah's eyes. Sarah, leave the key on the table. Jessica walked up to Sarah, invading her personal space. She smelled of overpowering jasmine and expensive champagne. So you're the simple wife. I must say, Preston wasn't exaggerating. That sweater is tragic. Is it vintage or just garbage? Sarah looked at Jessica. For a second, the air in the room grew heavy. Sarah's posture shifted. She straightened her spine, and suddenly she seemed taller. The simple girl from Ohio vanished, replaced by someone with eyes like cold steel. "Be careful with the floors, Jessica," Sarah said, her voice dropping an octave. "Marble stains easily when you spill cheap ambition on it." Jessica gasped, turning to Preston. "Baby." "Did you hear that?" Preston stepped forward, his face red. "Get out, Sarah. Take your 50 grand and go back to wherever you came from. Ohio. Kentucky. Just go." Sarah placed the key on the console table with a definitive click. "I'm not going back to Ohio, Preston. I have some business to attend to in the city." "With what money?" Preston laughed cruelly. "You'll burn through that check in a month in this city." "You'll be begging me for a job." "I don't think so." Sarah grabbed the handles of her suitcases. "Goodbye, Preston. I hope she's worth the price you're going to pay." She walked into the elevator. As the doors closed, she saw Jessica popping a bottle of champagne, spraying foam over the couch Sarah had spent weeks picking out. Sarah stepped out of the building and onto the busy Manhattan sidewalk. It was raining. A typical movie cliché, she thought. But there was no taxi waiting for her. Instead, a convoy of 3 black Range Rovers idled at the curb. They weren't Ubers. They had diplomatic plates. A man in a sharp suit stepped out of the lead vehicle. He was older, with silver hair and the bearing of a man who had killed people for a living. He held a large black umbrella, opening it instantly to shield Sarah from the rain. "Your Highness," he said, bowing his head deeply. "Henry," Sarah replied, handing him her battered suitcase. "Please, no titles." "Not yet." "Is the townhouse prepared?" "The Upper East Side residence has been secured, ma'am. The staff has been flown in from the palace. Your grandmother, the Grand Duchess, sends her regards. She is eager to see you re-enter society." Sarah slid into the back of the armored SUV. The interior was cream leather, smelling of lavender. She pulled the plastic clip out of her hair, letting the dark waves fall over her shoulders. She stripped off the grey cardigan, revealing a silk camisole underneath. "How long do I have until the gala?" she asked. 3 weeks, Your Highness," Henry said from the front seat. "We have taken the liberty of declining Mr. Calloway's attendance request, but it seems he purchased a table through a third-party donor." Sarah smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Let him come. Let him bring Jessica. I want them to have front-row seats. And the settlement check, ma'am." Henry gestured to the paper in her hand. Sarah looked at the check for $50,000. Preston Calloway's signature was scrawled across the bottom in arrogant loops. "Frame it," she said. "Put it in the guest bathroom of the villa in Monaco. It will be a funny story for the guests." The next 3 weeks were a blur of activity, but not the kind Preston Calloway would have recognized. While Preston was busy buying Jessica diamond earrings and trying to secure investors for his new tech venture, Sarah had ceased to exist. In the secure townhouse on 72nd Street, Lady Seraphina of House Valois-Bourbon, third in line to the throne of the Principality of Valoria, was undergoing a restoration. Valoria was small, nestled between France and Italy, but it was obscenely wealthy. It was the banking capital of the old world, a place where billionaires went to hide their money from millionaires. And Serafina's family owned half of it. She had left 5 years ago to live like a normal person, to study art in New York without the burden of security details and paparazzi. She met Preston, fell in love with his drive, and thought she could be happy as a normal wife. She had hidden her identity to ensure he loved her, not her title. She had been wrong. "Hold still, Your Highness," the stylist muttered. Serafina stood in front of a three-way mirror. The grey cardigans were gone. In their place, designers were flying in from Paris and Milan for private fittings. The theme of the gala is Gilded Age, her personal secretary, a sharp-eyed woman named Clara, said, scrolling through an iPad. Mr. Calloway and Miss Vane are wearing custom Versace. Very loud. Very new money. And us? Serafina asked. Alexander McQueen. Archival. And the crown jewels have cleared customs. Serafina paused. The Valoria Sun, Clara confirmed. It was a necklace featuring a 40-carat yellow diamond, last worn by Serafina's grandmother at the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. It was worth more than Preston's entire company. Good, Serafina said. I want to make sure I reflect the light properly. Meanwhile, across town, Preston's life was beginning to fray at the edges. Why can't we get a better table? Jessica whined, throwing her phone onto the sofa. Table 45 is near the kitchen, Preston. It's embarrassing, Preston rubbed his temples. I tried, Jess. The committee said the front tables are reserved for distinguished guests. Of the state, I don't know what that means. Probably some diplomats. I bought a dress that shows side boob, Preston. I need to be seen. We will be seen, Preston snapped. He was stressed. Since Sarah left, the apartment was chaotic. He hadn't realized how much she did. The bills weren't auto-paying correctly. The laundry service lost his shirts. And he felt unsettled. He had expected Sarah to call, to beg for more money, to yell. But there had been total radio silence. Her phone number was disconnected. She had vanished into the ether of New York City. Did you hear about the mystery guest? Jessica asked, scrolling through TikTok. Everyone is talking about it. Apparently, some European royal is making their US debut at the gala. They say she's the most eligible bachelorette in the world. Preston snorted. Royals. Inbred figureheads. They don't know how to work for $1. Well, I want to meet her, Jessica said, applying lip gloss. Maybe I can get a selfie. Think of the engagement. Fine, Preston sighed. We'll find the princess. Just make sure you look better than her, Jessica laughed. Please. How hard can that be? She probably looks like a horse. The week leading up to the Met Gala was supposed to be the pinnacle of Preston Calloway's life. It was meant to be a victory lap. Instead, it felt like a slow-motion car crash. The penthouse once a sanctuary of minimalist order under Sarah's care, had devolved into a high-fashion war zone. Jessica Vane did not live in a space, she colonized it. Every surface was covered in open PR packages, half-drunk green juices, and discarded clothing. "Where is my black Amex?" Preston shouted from the bedroom on Tuesday morning. He was already late for a meeting with the partners at Sterling and Cooper. "I gave it to my makeup artist," Jessica yelled back from the living room, where she was currently live streaming a Get Ready With Me video to her 2 million followers. "She needed to buy some l'armure for my prep." "Don't be stingy, babe. Say hi to the stream." Preston walked out, half-dressed, tie undone. "You gave my credit card to a stranger." Jessica rolled her eyes at the ring light. "She's not a stranger, she's Sasha. And you're ruining the lighting." "Move," Preston gritted his teeth. He missed his coffee. Sarah used to have a pot of single-origin Ethiopian roast waiting for him at 6:00 a.m. sharp. Now the coffee machine was broken because Jessica had tried to froth oat milk in the water reservoir. "I'm leaving," Preston snapped. "And get this place cleaned up. We are hosting the pre-gala drinks on Saturday." "About that," Jessica said, finally looking away from her phone. "The caterer cancelled." "What? Something about payment issues. Did you forget to transfer the deposit?" "You're so scatterbrained lately, Preston." Preston froze. He hadn't forgotten. He had set up the auto draft from the joint account, the account he used to share with Sarah. He pulled out his phone and logged into the banking app. Access DENIED. His heart hammered. He called the bank immediately as he descended in the elevator. "Mr. Calloway," the bank manager's voice was uncharacteristically cold. "We froze the joint account due to suspicious activity. A large withdrawal was flagged." "I didn't make a withdrawal," Preston barked. "No, sir. Mrs. Calloway did. As a joint holder, she liquidated her portion of the assets. 50%. As per the state laws regarding separation prior to divorce finalization, she was within her rights." Preston leaned against the elevator wall, feeling dizzy. "She took half. That account had the liquidity for the gala table. That was $200,000. She left exactly half, Mr. Calloway." "Have a good day." Preston hung up, his hands shaking. "Sarah." The woman who clipped coupons for laundry detergent had just swiped $100 grand without blinking. He had underestimated her spite. But the financial hit was nothing compared to the professional one waiting for him at the office. Preston walked into the glass-walled conference room of his hedge fund, Calloway Capital. Usually, the room was buzzing with the energy of 20-something analysts desperate to please him. Today, it was silent. Benedict Sterling, his lawyer and oldest investor, was sitting at the head of the table. He looked pale. "Benedict," Preston asked, putting on his best winning smile. "Ready to discuss the Q3 projections?" "I'm telling you, the tech short is going to print money." Benedict didn't smile back. He slid a folder across the table. "We lost the Valoria account," Benedict said quietly. The air left the room. The Valoria account wasn't just a client, it was the whale. It was a sovereign wealth fund from a small European principality that provided 40% of the firm's operating capital. It was the money that allowed Preston to lease the penthouse, buy the cars, and pay for Jessica's lifestyle. "What do you mean we lost it?" Preston demanded. "I just had lunch with their representative last month. They love us, they pulled out this morning." "Effective immediately," Benedict said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "They cited ethical concerns regarding leadership stability. Preston, they explicitly mentioned the divorce. My personal life has nothing to do with my returns." Preston slammed his fist on the table. "It does when the client is old-world royalty," Benedict snapped. "They value family values, tradition, discretion. You dumping your wife of 5 years for an Instagram model. It spooked them. They pulled $50 million out of our fund an hour ago. We are leveraged to the hilt, Preston. If we don't replace that capital in a week, we are insolvent." Preston sank into a chair. "Insolvent. Broke." "I'll fix it," Preston whispered, though he had no idea how. "I'll find a new backer at the Met Gala. Everyone who is anyone will be there. I just need one meeting with the DuPonts or the Rothschilds." Benedict looked at him with pity. "You better hope so. Because right now, you're bleeding out." That night, Preston returned home to find Jessica sobbing on the floor, surrounded by shredded tulle. "This dress makes me look fat," she screamed, throwing a $12,000 gown at him. "And the tabloids are saying I'm a homewrecker. Me. Can you believe it? They're Team Sarah." "Who even is Sarah?" Preston looked at the weeping woman, then at the empty spot on the counter where Sarah used to leave his mail. He felt a phantom ache in his chest. "Sarah is nobody," Preston said, his voice hollow. "Get up, Jessica. We have a gala to conquer, the first Monday in May." The air in New York City crackled with electricity. The Metropolitan Museum of Art had been transformed. The famous steps were draped in a carpet of deep crimson, flanked by walls of white roses. The theme was gilded glamour, the renaissance of power, a nod to old money and opulence. Preston Calloway adjusted his tuxedo. It was a Tom Ford custom fit, but it felt tight around the collar. He had spent the last 48 hours frantically calling investors, but no one was picking up. He was radioactive. Beside him, Jessica Vane was preening. She wore a sheer, crystal-encrusted gown that left very little to the imagination. It was loud. It was aggressive. It screamed, "Look at me." "Okay, remember," Jessica hissed as the SUV pulled up to the tent. "Hold my hand, look lovingly at me. We need to sell the romance." The door opened. Flashbulbs erupted. For a moment, Preston felt the old rush. The attention. The power. He stepped out, offering his hand to Jessica. She emerged, posing instantly, blowing kisses to the photographers. But the shouts weren't for them. "Beyoncé. Beyoncé over here, Rihanna." To the left, the wall of photographers barely clicked a shutter for Preston and Jessica. They were filler. Background noise. A cameraman from Vogue actually waved Jessica out of the way to get a better shot of a TikTok star behind her. "They're ignoring me," Jessica whispered, her smile fixed but her eyes manic. "Why are they ignoring me? Just keep walking," Preston muttered, feeling the humiliation burn his neck. They reached the top of the stairs, where the hosts were greeting the A-list. Preston scanned the crowd, desperate to find a friendly face or a wealthy one. He spotted the CEO of Goldman Sachs and started to move toward him, but a security guard with an earpiece stepped in his path. "Mr. Calloway," the guard said firmly, "your table is in the West Wing. You need to enter through the side corridor." "Side corridor," Preston sputtered. "I paid $50,000 for a table. Standard tables are in there." "West Wing. The main hall is for VIPs and distinguished guests only," Jessica gasped. "West Wing. That's where they put the D-listers." "Preston, do something." Before Preston could argue, a hush fell over the crowd. It started at the bottom of the stairs, a ripple of silence that spread upward like a wave. The chaotic shouting of the paparazzi stopped. The chatter of the celebrities died down. Even the traffic on Fifth Avenue seemed to pause. Everyone turned to look at the entrance. A single vehicle had pulled up. It wasn't a modern limo. It was a vintage Rolls-Royce Phantom IV, the kind used by heads of state in the 1950s. It was jet black, bearing a flag on the fender, a golden lion on a field of azures. A footman in full livery opened the door. First came the shoe, a glass slipper with a heel sharp enough to kill, adorned with diamonds. Then the dress. It was a masterpiece of defiance. It wasn't sheer. It wasn't trendy. It was regal. The gown was made of midnight blue velvet that appeared almost black, with a train that flowed like liquid ink down the red carpets. Embroidered along the hem in real gold thread were the constellations of the night sky. The woman wearing it stood tall. Her hair, once kept in a messy bun, was now cascading in glossy, dark waves down her back. Her skin glowed with health and expensive skincare. But it was the necklace that made the crowd gasp. Resting on her collarbone was the Valoria sun. The yellow diamond was the size of a walnut, surrounded by a galaxy of smaller white diamonds. It caught the flash of the few cameras that dared to snap, sending beams of light fracturing across the crowd. "Who is that?" Jessica whispered, clutching Preston's arm. "Is that a movie star?" Preston squinted. He knew that walk. He knew the curve of that shoulder. But his brain refused to process the information. It was impossible. The woman began to ascend the stairs. She didn't smile for the cameras. She didn't wave. She walked with the terrifying grace of someone who owned the very ground beneath her feet. Anna Wintour, the queen of the gala, bypassed Rihanna to walk down 3 steps and greet the newcomer. "Your Highness," Anna's voice carried in the silence. "We are honored," the woman nodded, a small, polite smile touching her lips. "Thank you, Anna." It's good to be back in the light. She turned, and for the first time, she looked directly up the stairs. Her eyes locked onto Preston. The world stopped spinning for Preston Calloway. The air left his lungs. He felt like he had been punched in the gut by a heavyweight boxer. Those were hazel eyes. That was the nose he had kissed 1,000 times. That was the woman he had told to pack her bags and get out. Sarah, he mouthed, no sound coming out. Beside him, Jessica followed his gaze. She looked at the royal beauty, then back at Preston, then back at the woman. "Wait," Jessica said, her voice rising in horror. Is that your ex-wife?" Sarah, no, Serafina, didn't blink. She held Preston's gaze for 3 seconds, her expression unreadable. Not hate. Not love. Just absolute, crushing superiority. Then she looked through him as if he were a pane of glass and continued her ascent, the crowd parting for her like the Red Sea. The interior of the Metropolitan Museum of Art was a sensory overload of the highest order. It was a cathedral of ego. The air was thick with the scent of 10,000 lilies, mixed with the expensive perfume of women who had never washed a dish in their lives. For Preston Calloway, however, the atmosphere was suffocating. He stood on the periphery of the Great Hall, exiled to the dreaded West Wing overflow area. This was where the B-list actors, the declining reality stars, and the people who had merely bought tickets, rather than being invited, were corralled. "I can't believe this," Jessica Vane hissed, her voice a serrated knife cutting through the ambient string quartet. She was aggressively refreshing her Instagram feed, her face illuminated by the cold blue light of the screen. "We're next to the bathrooms, Preston. The literal bathrooms." I made eye contact with a waiter carrying dirty dishes. "Do you understand what this does to my brand?" Preston didn't answer. He was busy trying to spot anyone who mattered. He craned his neck, looking past the velvet ropes toward the Temple of Dendua, where the real power brokers were dining. He saw the CEO of BlackRock laughing with a French actress. He saw the founder of a tech giant clinking glasses with a senator. That was where he belonged. That was the world he had sacrificed his marriage to enter. "Are you even listening to me?" Jessica snapped, digging her nails into his tuxedo sleeve. "We need to sneak in. I need a photo with someone relevant. Go bribe a guard. It's not that simple, Jessica," Preston muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead. His tuxedo felt like a vice. "You don't just sneak past Secret Service detail." Suddenly, the ambient noise of the gala shifted. It wasn't a gradual quiet. It was a sudden, vacuum-like silence that started at the massive entrance doors and swept through the hall like a cold wind. The string quartet faltered, the cellist's bow hovering in midair. The chatter of billionaires and supermodels died in their throats. Everyone turned. The massive bronze doors of the museum were thrown open. Usually, guests trickled in. But this arrival was synchronized. First, 6 men entered. They weren't museum security. They were royal guards, dressed in modern black tuxedos, but moving with the unmistakable precision of military training. They wore small lapel pins, a golden lion on a field of azure. They fanned out, creating a sterile perimeter around the entrance. Then she stepped through the doors. Preston blinked. His brain refused to process the visual data. He knew the woman's. He knew the curve of her jaw, the arch of her brow, the way she held her chin slightly elevated. He had woken up next to that face for 5 years. He had watched her brush her teeth. He had watched her cry over a dead goldfish. But this woman wasn't Sarah. Sarah was grey cardigans and burnt toast. Sarah was coupon clipping and shy smiles. Sarah was the woman he had discarded because she was too plain for his bright future. The woman standing at the top of the stairs was a deity. She wore a gown that seemed to be woven from the midnight sky itself, a deep, crushing velvet that absorbed the light, contrasting with a train embroidered in real gold thread depicting the constellations of the Northern Hemisphere. It was regal, imposing, and utterly timeless. But it was the necklace that stole the breath from the room. Resting against her throat was a yellow diamond the size of a pigeon's egg. It pulsed with an inner fire, casting fractured beams of amber light across the marble walls. "My God," a woman next to Preston whispered, clutching her pearls. "Is that the Valoria sun? I thought it was in a vault in Zurich." "It is," her companion replied, his voice shaking. "It only comes out for coronations." That's Her Royal Highness, Princess Serafina. The name hit Preston like a physical blow. He staggered back, nearly knocking over a waiter. "No," he whispered. "That's Sarah. That's my wife." Beside him, Jessica Vane had stopped refreshing her feed. Her mouth was slightly open. She looked from the radiant woman on the stairs to Preston, and then back again. "Preston," she said slowly, "why does your ex-wife look like she owns the building?" Serafina began to descend the stairs. She didn't walk, she glided. The crowd, a collection of the most powerful egos on the planet, parted for her instinctively. It was a red sea of haute couture splitting for Moses. Anna Wintour, the high priestess of fashion, broke protocol. She bypassed a Hollywood A-lister and walked 3 steps up to meet Serafina. "Your Highness," Anna's voice carried through the silent hall. "We were not sure you would accept the invitation." Serafina paused. She looked down at Anna with a benevolent, terrifying grace. "One cannot stay in the shadows forever, Anna. Sometimes the sun must rise." She turned her head. It wasn't a casual glance. It was a precision strike. Her hazel eyes scanned the room, bypassing the celebrities, the politicians, the tycoons, until they locked onto the West Wing overflow area. They locked onto Preston. For 5 years, Preston had looked at Sarah with pity. Now she looked at him with something far worse, indifference. It was the look a human gives an ant before stepping on it, not out of malice, but because the ant is simply beneath notice. "She's looking at us," Jessica squeaked. "Preston, she's looking at us. This is it. We can spin this." We're the family. Shut up, Preston hissed. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. She lied to me. She played me. Who cares? Jessica grabbed his arm, her nails digging in hard enough to draw blood. If you're still married, you're practically a duke. Do you know what this does for my engagement numbers? We have to go say hello. We can't just... But Jessica was already moving. Driven by the starving desperation of an influencer sensing a viral moment, she ducked under the velvet rope. Jessica, stop! Preston lunged after her, panic surging through him. But he couldn't let her go alone. He couldn't let Jessica control the narrative. He needed to talk to Sarah. He needed to explain. He needed to renegotiate. He scrambled under the rope, ignoring the shouted protests of the West Wing Guard. He chased Jessica toward the center of the room, his patent leather shoes slipping on the polished floor. They reached the epicenter just as Serafina reached the bottom of the stairs. The circle of security guards tensed, ready to intercept, but Serafina raised a single, gloved hand. The guards froze. She wanted this. Jessica arrived first, breathless, her chest heaving, her phone already raised in selfie mode. Zero. OMG, hey girl, Jessica shrieked, her voice shattering the sophisticated atmosphere. I didn't know you were coming. We should have coordinated outfits. Look at us, the Calloway girls. The silence in the room was absolute. A pin dropping would have sounded like a gunshot. Serafina looked at the phone, then at Jessica. She didn't blink. She didn't recoil. She just stood there, radiating an aura of such intense power that Jessica actually took a step back, lowering her phone. Miss Vane, Serafina said. Her voice was soft, melodic, but it carried to the back of the room without a microphone. It was a voice trained in palaces. I believe you have mistaken this gathering for one of your sponsored content activations. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Jessica flushed a deep, blotchy red. We're just saying hi, Jessica stammered, her confidence evaporating. Since we're family now, family implies a connection of blood or honor, Serafina said coolly. You possess neither. She stepped closer, her eyes scanning Jessica's chaotic, revealing dress. And a word of advice from one woman to another. When attempting to enter high society, one should ensure their dress is not from a season 3 years past. It smells of desperation. Jessica gasped, clutching her chest as if she'd been slapped. Preston shoved past Jessica, sweat dripping down his nose. He felt manic. The room was spinning. Sarah, he choked out. Serafina. Whatever your name is, Serafina turned her gaze to him. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Hello, Preston, she said. You lied, Preston stammered, pointing a shaking finger at her. 5 years. You told me you were a barista from Ohio. You told me your father was a florist. My father cultivates rare orchids in the royal gardens, Serafina replied, her face impassive. Technically, he is a florist. I never lied, Preston. I simply allowed you to make assumptions. And you assumed that because I was kind, I was weak. And because I was thrifty, I was poor. I'm your husband, Preston shouted. The desperation was clawing at his throat. He looked around the room, trying to find sympathy in the faces of the crowd, but saw only disgust. We are legally married. That necklace, that dress, those are marital assets. I am entitled to half. The audacity of the statement made the crowd gasp. Serafina laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was dark, rich, and dangerous. Oh, Preston, she said, shaking her head slowly. You were always so good at reading the stock market and so terrible at reading the fine print. She took a step toward him. The heels of her glass slippers clicked sharply on the marble. Do you remember the prenup you forced me to sign? She asked softly. The one your lawyer, Benedict, drew up to protect your future millions. Of course I remember it, Preston spat. It protects me from you. Actually, Serafina corrected him, it protects the superior financial party from the dependent party. At the time, you assumed you were the superior party. But in the eyes of the law, my net worth, which includes the sovereign wealth of Valoria, dwarfs yours by a factor of 10,000. Preston froze. His mouth went dry. And she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that only he and the 50 people closest to them could hear. There is the matter of jurisdiction. You filed for divorce in New York. But I filed for an annulment in Valoria this morning. So what? Preston challenged, though his voice was wavering. Valoria is a tiny rock in Europe. Valoria is a sovereign nation with very old, very specific laws regarding the betrayal of the royal family, Serafina said. Her eyes hardened into diamonds. Under Valorian Statute 17, adultery committed against a member of the royal house is not a civil matter, Preston. It is an act of treason. Treason, Preston laughed nervously. What are you going to do? Behead me, we are civilized, Preston. We don't take heads anymore, she smiled, sending a chill down his spine. We take assets. She gestured slightly to a man standing in the shadows, Benedict Sterling, Preston's own lawyer. Benedict stepped forward, holding a tablet. He wouldn't look Preston in the eye. Mr. Sterling, Preston whispered. I'm sorry, Preston, Benedict murmured. I represent the crown now, Serafina continued, her voice ringing out like a judge delivering a sentence. As of 9:00 a.m. this morning, the High Court of Valoria has frozen all assets connected to the traitorous party to cover the reputational damages to the crown. Your hedge fund, Calloway Capital, was leveraged against international bonds. Bonds that my family's bank underwrote. Preston felt the blood drain from his face. No, we called the bonds Preston, Serafina said simply. Your company is insolvent. Your personal accounts have been seized to pay the creditors. Your penthouse has been foreclosed. She leaned in close, her breath warm against his icy cheek. You wanted a trophy wife, Preston. You wanted gold. You should have checked to see who owned the mine. You are not just divorced. You are not just single. You are destitute. Preston's knees gave out. He stumbled back, catching himself on Jessica's arm. Jessica shoved him away, looking at him with pure horror. "You're broke," Jessica shrieked. "You're actually broke." "Security," Serafina said calmly, turning her back on them. "Please remove these trespassers. They are blocking the view of the exhibit." 4 large guards materialized. 2 grabbed Preston by the arms. 2 grabbed Jessica, who began to scream about her rights and her follow account. "Zero. You can't do this," Preston screamed as he was dragged backward, his heels skidding on the polished floor. "I loved you. I loved you," Serafina paused. She didn't turn around. She simply adjusted the Valoria sun on her neck, checking her reflection in a nearby glass case. "No, Preston," she said to her reflection. "You loved yourself. And now that is all you have left." She walked toward the Temple of Dendua, where the kings and queens of industry were waiting to bow to her, leaving Preston Calloway to be dragged out into the cold, unforgiving rain of the city he used to think he owned. The sidewalk outside the Metropolitan Museum of Art was cold, hard, and unforgiving. It was a stark contrast to the velvet-lined fantasy Preston Calloway had just been dragged out of. He stood there, his Tom Ford tuxedo crumpled, one cufflink missing, ripped off in the scuffle with the security team. Beside him, Jessica Vane was frantically trying to fix a broken strap on her dress, muttering curses that would make a sailor blush. "Do something, Preston," she screeched, shoving her phone in his face. "My live stream cut out right when they grabbed you. People think I'm being arrested." "Fix this," Preston stared at the phone, his vision blurring. He wasn't looking at the screen, he was looking at the notification banner at the top. "Bank of America, alert. Account ending in 8904 has been frozen. Balance $420,000,000. Amex Platinum transaction declined. Card cancelled." "It's gone," Preston whispered. The noise of New York City traffic roared in his ears, sounding like a chaotic symphony of failure. "It's all gone." "What's gone?" Jessica snapped. "The signal. We can get an Uber to the after party. I need to be seen at the Boom Boom Room or my career is over." Preston looked at her. Really looked at her. Under the streetlights, without the filters and the ring lights, she looked sharp, angular, and desperate. There was no softness there. No warmth. Just a hunger that could never be sated. "There is no after party, Jessica," Preston said, his voice cracking. "There is no Uber. My accounts are frozen. The company has been seized. I think I'm bankrupt." Jessica froze. She slowly lowered her phone. "Bankrupt? As in temporary liquidity issue? Or bankrupt as in poor, as in zero?" Preston said. "As in she took it all." Jessica stared at him for a long, calculating second. Then she let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Wow! You really are a loser, aren't you? You told me you were a financial genius. You told me you were going to buy me a villa in Como." "I was," Preston yelled, drawing the attention of a few passing tourists. "I was a genius until that witch ruined me. Don't call her a witch, Jessica sneered, stepping back and hailing a yellow taxi. She's a princess. You're just the idiot who didn't know his wife was royalty. Honestly, Preston, it's embarrassing. I can't be associated with this level of failure. It's bad for my brand. Where are you going? Preston reached for her arm, but she slapped his hand away. To the after party, she said coldly. I saw Sebastian Thorne inside. He's been deeming me for months. He's a billionaire who actually owns his company. Don't contact me, Preston. My lawyer will be in touch about the emotional distress you've caused me tonight. She jumped into the cab and slammed the door. Preston watched the taillights fade into the sea of traffic, leaving him alone on Fifth Avenue. He checked his pockets. No wallet. No cash. Just his phone with 4% battery and a house key. The house. He needed to get home. He could figure this out from the penthouse. He had assets in the safe, watches, cash, gold bars. He just needed to get to the safe. He began to walk. It was 60 blocks to the penthouse. By the time he arrived, his patent leather shoes were blistered, and it had started to drizzle. He walked into the lobby of his building, usually a place where he strode in like a king. Evening, Frank, Preston muttered to the doorman, heading for the elevator. Hold it right there, Mr. Calloway, Frank said. His voice wasn't friendly. Frank was a large man, a former NYPD officer whom Preston had never bothered to tip at Christmas. Preston had once threatened to have Frank fired for opening the door too slowly. Frank stepped in front of the elevator bank. Get out of my way, Frank, Preston growled. I've had a hell of a night. You don't live here anymore, Mr. Calloway, Frank said, crossing his arms. Excuse me. I own the penthouse. Actually, the deed was transferred electronically about 3 hours ago, Frank said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. The new owner, a holding company called House of Valois, issued strict instructions. You are not permitted on the premises. That's illegal. My stuff is up there. Your personal effects have been collected, Frank said, pointing a thumb toward the service entrance. They're on the curb. In black bags. Except for the items purchased with marital funds, which have been retained by the owner. Preston ran outside. There, sitting in a puddle near the garbage cans, were 3 heavy-duty trash bags. He ripped one open. It was his clothes. His suits. But not the Armani ones. Not the Tom Ford. It was his old clothes. The sweatpants from college. The t-shirts with holes in them. The cheap suits he wore when he was an intern. He frantically tore open the other bags. No Rolexes. No gold bars. Just old paperwork, some toiletries, and a framed photo of him and Sarah from their wedding day, the glass cracked down the middle. This can't be happening, Preston sobbed, sinking to his knees in the rain. The final blow the next morning, Preston sat in the waiting room of Sterling and Cooper. He hadn't slept. He was wearing the sweatpants he found in the trash bag and a wrinkled t-shirt. He looked like a madman. Benedict Sterling walked in. He didn't offer Preston a coffee. "Benedict," Preston pleaded, standing up. "You have to help me. She stole everything. The penthouse, the accounts, the firm." "You're my lawyer." "I was your lawyer, Preston," Benedict said, sitting down and opening a thick file. "I resigned as your counsel at 9:00 a.m. this morning. I have been retained by the Principality of Valoria to handle the transition of assets." "You're working for her," Preston shouted. "Traitor, it's business, Preston. Just like you said when you served her divorce papers on your anniversary." "Purely business." Benedict slid a document across the table. "What is this?" "This is a copy of the Valorian Royal Charter, Section 4, Article 12. Regarding the dissolution of royal marriages involving commoners. You see, Preston, when you married Sarah, on that yacht in international waters, you signed a marriage license. Do you recall not reading it because you were too drunk on champagne?" Preston stayed silent. "That license registered your marriage in Valoria, not New York. Under Valorian law, if a commoner spouse commits adultery and initiates divorce proceedings with malicious intent, they forfeit all rights to marital assets. Furthermore, any assets gained during the marriage using the royal spouse's influence or initial capital are subject to seizure." "I didn't use her capital," Preston argued. "I built Calloway Capital from nothing." "Did you?" Benedict raised an eyebrow. "Reviewing the books, your first major angel investor was a shell company called Blue Lion Holdings. That company is owned by Serafina's grandmother. They gave you the seed money because Serafina asked them to. She believed in you. She wanted you to feel successful." Preston felt the room spin. She funded me. She made you, Preston. And yesterday, she unmade you." Benedict closed the file. "The audit is complete. Your firm was leveraged 20-1. Once the Valoria fund pulled out, the margin calls triggered instantly. The company is dissolved. The assets, the office, the computers, the intellectual property have been purchased by the Crown for a nominal fee of $1. $1, yes. And you personally. You have roughly $80,000 in credit card debt, a lease on a Porsche you can no longer pay for, and zero liquidity. You are destitute." Benedict stood up and buttoned his jacket. "My security team will escort you out." "Oh, and Preston. A personal note. She really did love you. All you had to do was be a decent man. It was the easiest job in the world, and you failed." 6 months later, the harsh winter of New York had arrived. The wind whipped down the avenues, cutting through the thin coats of the commuters. In a small, grease-stained diner in Queens, a man wiped down the counter with a gray rag. He looked older than his 35 years. His hair was thinning, his face gaunt. "Hey, new guys. Table 4 needs coffee," the manager yelled from the kitchen. "Coming," Preston mumbled. He grabbed the pot and walked over to the booths. He poured coffee for a young couple who were too busy looking at their phones to acknowledge him. "Did you see this?" the girl said, angling her screen toward her boyfriend. "Princess Serafina is in New York again. She's opening that massive new charity center today. Preston's hand trembled. A few drops of hot coffee splashed onto the table. "Watch it, buddy," the boyfriend snapped. "Sorry," Preston whispered, wiping it up. He looked up at the TV mounted in the corner of the diner. It was CNN. Breaking news. There she was. Serafina. She looked radiant, wearing a cream-colored coat and the same confident smile that had captivated the world. She was standing in front of a gleaming glass building in Manhattan, the building that used to house Calloway Capital. But the sign had changed. "We are proud to open the New Horizons Foundation." Serafina spoke into the microphone, her voice clear and strong. "This building, which was once a monument to corporate greed, will now serve as a sanctuary. We will provide housing, legal aid, and financial education to women who have been discarded and financially abused by their partners." The crowd cheered. "We are turning pain into power," Serafina continued. "And we are funding this entirely with the liquidated assets of the previous ownership." The camera panned to the crowd. Preston saw faces he recognized. Former investors. Former friends. Even Benedict Sterling was there, clapping enthusiastically. And then he saw her. Jessica Vane. She was in the front row, hanging onto the arm of Sebastian Thorne. She looked at the camera and clapped, looking every bit the supportive socialite, having completely erased Preston from her history. The reporter on the screen asked a question. "Your Highness, do you have any message for the people who doubted you? For the anchors in your past?" Serafina looked directly into the camera lens. For a heart-stopping second, Preston felt she was looking right through the TV screen, into the dingy diner in Queens, seeing him in his stained apron. She smiled. It wasn't a smile of vengeance anymore. It was a smile of total, absolute indifference. "I don't think about the past," she said softly. "I'm too busy building the future. The anchors are at the bottom of the ocean where they belong. I'm sailing." She turned and cut the ribbon. The crowd roared. Preston stared at the screen until the manager slapped the counter. "Hey, Calloway, quit daydreaming and scrub the grill. You're on probation, remember?" Preston looked down at his hands. "Rough. Jabbed. Empty." "Yes, boss," he said. He turned away from the TV, away from the woman who could have given him the world, and walked back into the kitchen to scrape the burnt grease off the grill. He had wanted to be a king. He had ended up as the help. And the worst part wasn't the poverty. It wasn't the humiliation. It was the knowledge that he had held a diamond in his hand, mistook it for glass, and threw it away. And that is the tragic, satisfying downfall of Preston Calloway. He spent his life chasing gold, never realizing the woman sleeping next to him was the treasure he was looking for. It's a brutal lesson. When you treat people like disposable objects, don't be surprised when you're the one who ends up in the trash. Preston learned the hard way that true value isn't in a bank account. It's in loyalty, character, and love. "What do you think?" was Serafina's revenge too harsh, or did Preston get exactly what he deserved? And what about Jessica? Did she get off too easy? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of royal justice, please hit that like button, share this with a friend who loves a good drama, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. See you in the next video.